After Patriots practice day number 7 of training camp at Foxborough and Gillette Stadium, Evan Lazar, Alex Barth, Patriots Beat podcast. And Alex, we saw a very heavy passing day out there today, I would say, after a very heavy run day on day 1 of pads on Tuesday. The Patriots were back in shorts and shells on Wednesday. They'll be in pads again on Thursday. We're supposed to get a lot of rain in the Foxborough area on Thursday, so it's definitely going to be a run-heavy session, you would think, again tomorrow. But it will be interesting to see in the rain how both quarterbacks throw the football in inclement weather when they do get chances to pass it. But I wanted to start with Cam and Mac Jones because I thought Josh McDaniels' comments after practice were pretty interesting about the two QBs. We can get into that a little bit, but just what happened out there on the field today. Bill Belichick spoke last week about consistency, right? And how important consistency is at the quarterback position, and how that, I think, is going to be maybe one of the biggest sort of barometers when they do make this decision officially. Now, I guess we shouldn't say officially because he keeps on saying Cam's the quarterback. So if they are going to give Mac a chance to be the starter.
Well, you can say when he makes the week 1 decision.
Sure. All right, let's go with that. I like that. When he makes the week 1 decision.
Right, because him saying Cam is the starting quarterback, I think did we talk about this before?
Yeah.
He's referring to the day he was asked that question.
Right.
If there was a game today, first of all, that would be ludicrous because it's early August and you don't play NFL football in early August. When he says, I'm sorry to just cut you off, but I saw so many people just kind of running with this and it was bugging me. If you ask Bill Belichick, who is the starting quarterback, he is going to tell you who the starting quarterback is at that moment in time. So Cam Newton is the starting quarterback right now. There is still a decision to be made, though, for week 1. That is still up in the air, unofficially.
Right. And Josh McDaniels' comments today basically saying at some point in time in the next couple of weeks, Belichick is going to have to make a decision, right, of which direction we're going to go in an offense. It's going to be Belichick's decision. We're going to get to that point. You don't say that if there isn't at least a chance that it's not Cam Newton, right? That really is presenting it right there as a fact that it is a little bit open. And the one thing, going back to my original point, was that Belichick said consistency. That's the most important thing for all players. And I think in terms of quarterbacks, that's even more so important, down in and down out, but also day in and day out. And I think that that's where Cam has really impressed Belichick a lot of the time, is that day in and day out, he's the same guy. Whether he stunk the day before or not, he comes in and he's the same guy every single day. But consistency has really not been the name of the game for either of these quarterbacks through 7 practices. Yesterday, on Tuesday, we started the show talking about how good Cam was, right? And how well he threw the football, and how Mac kind of struggled in the first day of padded practices. Now today, it feels like Mac played a lot better than Cam, and Cam had some issues throwing the football. Both of them really had issues that you can also talk about within just that one practice, right? If we don't want to look at it from a day-to-day perspective, you look at it just one practice, you can also see the ups and downs today. So if you want to talk about consistency, my point is, I don't think either one of these quarterbacks have been overly consistent. You can throw good throws for both of them in a bucket, right? And kind of evaluate both of them in terms of Mac had some good throws here, Cam had some good throws there. But in terms of overall consistency, both quarterbacks still kind of searching for it.
Yeah, I talked about this earlier today on Zolak and Bertrand. You can look at the consistency, and the consistency on the field, play to play, is what you're really looking for. But there's been other areas where Cam Newton has maybe been more consistent than Mac Jones. And the one I look at is command and control, right? Who has felt more consistently in command of the offense? That's Cam Newton. We've talked about this before. Mac Jones, at times, there's periods where you can tell he gets down on himself and things maybe start to speed up for him a little too much. Cam has had the consistency when it comes to the command. And I think that's a big thing right now, because in this offense, we've talked about it, they don't necessarily need a playmaking quarterback with some of these additions they made. They need somebody who's going to just make the offense go. Having command of the offense is how you do that. Losing command can create turnovers. So we've called Cam Newton the winner to this point. I don't think we would do that if there wasn't a reason for it. And outside of, the fact that he's been better on the field, it's not tremendously, but he's been better on the field. He just looks more in command. And Mac Jones is a rookie. Rookies tend not to be in command right away. That's tough. You try going to a new job and on day 1, 2, or 3 running a meeting.
Right.
It's gonna feel awkward. It's gonna be tough. So we'll see when Mac gets comfortable, and we'll see when that command shows up, because I think it will at some point. It might not be tomorrow, but I think it's coming relatively soon. But right now, Cam Newton is more consistently in command of the offense. And that is where, with that consistency comment, that is what I look at.
Right. And I think the biggest thing with Cam and Mac is obviously limiting the turnovers, because they have both turned the ball over at times way too often here in training camp so far, I would say. Cam with 2 interceptions. Mac really should have had 2 interceptions. I think they ruled D'Angelo Ross didn't actually pick off the second one, but it was close enough to being an interception. So 4 picks in practice today. If you want to include that Ross one or not, I guess we can come it down to 3. Either way, that's too many interceptions, especially in a non-padded training camp practice, right? You don't want the quarterbacks turning the ball over that much.
It was weird, though, because I think the pick Mac threw, that was, and I want to be careful how I phrase this so people don't run with this. That was setting up to be one of Mac's best plays of camp. There was a blitz coming from the strong side. He recognized it. He steps around it, resets. He throws the ball to a covered receiver. He put the ball where only Jonnu Smith could get his hands on it. Smith's coming over the middle, and he threw it for Smith to turn back and go over the back shoulder and fade. And that's a really good read by a rookie quarterback. And that's 2 guys have to be on the same page for that throw to be made. So there's some chemistry there. Smith is able to turn around, gets both hands on it. He just couldn't make the catch. He pops it up in the air, and Devin McCourty picks it off. So that was setting up to be one of Mac's better throws. The next pass wasn't picked off. It probably should have been. He just missed the receiver, and D'Angelo Ross was a second late getting to the spot. So I would use that sequence to caution people. And, we regurgitate stats as much as anybody else does. I'm guilty in this, but it's, we would love to describe every play to you in detail. We can't do it. It would, for a number of reasons, mainly it would take too long. But, it just took me a minute to describe a 15-second play. Now, that's a 2.5-hour practice. But there is a little more to the numbers than that. Mac's pick today, again, was actually set up to be a really good play. The next pass goes down in the notebook as an incompletion. Might have been his worst throw of the day. It was a significantly worse play than the actual interception he threw.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And what I really liked about Mac's day, I guess we can talk about that now since you already brought it up a little bit, was the throw after that to Gunnar Olszewski. He goes through that stretch of interception, near interception, throw behind Gunnar Olszewski with Miles Bryant in coverage, breaking that pass up. And then maybe a play or 2 later it took, but eventually he hits the deep post to Gunnar, right? And he sidesteps the pressure. He steps up in the pocket to avoid a sack and throws a dime in between 2 defenders down the field. And that was definitely one of those moments for Mac. And he consistently has these moments where you're like, that's a big time throw, right? That's a franchise quarterback throw. That's a big time throw. And as a rookie in his first training camp practice, we're 7 practices in, as long as he is showing those high-level throws here and there, and there's enough of those for us to sink our teeth into, I think Mac Jones is right on schedule, right? If he wasn't making any of those throws and he was having all these turnovers, that would be one thing. But there are 3 or 4 plays per practice, whether it's a little thing in the pocket where he just a subtle pocket movement, a good downfield throw like the one to Gunnar, or he actually hit Jacoby Myers, I thought, on a pretty nice tight window throw over the middle and 7-on-7. And there were other throws within that 16-rep sequence where he got 16 straight snaps where he looked very, very good as well. And you see there are some good in the good bucket for Mac Jones, as he would say, with the bad. So the flashes are there. And when it comes to Mac, and this is what I wrote today, we're going to look at this, I think, after that Eagles preseason game, once we get into some of the joint practices and once we get into some of the preseason games, and you're going to see a totally different quarterback in my mind than what we're seeing right now. Right now, we're at the baseline, right? And you see the flashes and you see the things that he does well. And I think that that's going to really start these next couple of weeks. I think you're really going to start to see him kind of get it a little bit more. And that's when the true competition, if there is a competition, is going to heat up between the 2 guys.
Yeah, I think that who did I talk about this? Said this to somebody earlier. It might have been on Zolak and Bertrand. The joint practices. That's going to be, I think, a major barometer. If you want to talk about, we don't have all the information yet that's going to go into this decision. Everybody wants to make a decision, and I think a lot of people wanted to make yesterday a definitive day, and maybe it was the most definitive so far, but when you factor in how much you're going to wait every session, right? We're maybe we have 10 to 15% of the total data we're going to have by the time this thing ends, because we have 7 practices, only one of them padded. There's still 4 or 6 joint practices. I don't remember if they're doing 2 or 3 with each team, but there's 4 to 6 joint practices.
They're doing 2 with the Eagles. I don't know if they've decided how many yet they're going to do with the Giants.
Yeah. So we'll call it 4 to 5 joint practices.
Yeah.
3 preseason games, a number of padded practices left. We got a session in the rain tomorrow, which I think is actually worth it, because you look at how these guys handle a little bit more of a challenge. So
that's going to be a big part of it, especially in Foxborough in December and January. You're going to be able to have to be able to handle the ball.
We are just scratching the surface of what both of these guys are going to be in 2021. Both Mac Jones, obviously there's a lot to learn about him as a rookie, but Cam Newton put in a ton of work in the offseason. And what is the new version of Cam Newton? We're just getting started here. There's a long way to go, and the narratives are going to change a lot. As definitive as yesterday may have felt, and again, it was probably the most definitive day so far, and that can be true. We have not had that definitive moment yet.
Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to bring up about Cam Newton was, I think the big question that I've gotten multiple times about today's practice is it that Mac Jones looks great in shorts and shells and Cam Newton looks better in full pads, right? Is that sort of where we're seeing the split? Now, we only have had 1 day in full pads, so it might be too early to make that determination. It is too early to make that determination, and we're going to have to wait for a couple more padded sessions to sort of compare it. But it is interesting that after throwing the ball extremely well yesterday, Cam comes back today in a non-padded session and throws 2 interceptions and just didn't really look like he had the same control on the ball as he did just less than 24 hours ago, right? It wasn't just the 2 picks. He also had to throw to N'Keal Harry, where N'Keal Harry really bailed him out. The ball was thrown well ahead of N'Keal Harry, and he dove out and made a great catch on it, and we're going to get to Harry in a second. But the sort of volatility of Cam Newton's game from the padded session to the non-padded session, how much stock do you put into what happened with Cam today after throwing the ball extremely well on Tuesday?
If he'd been, so-so, I'd probably put more into it. I think because he's, shown some encouraging signs, everybody's going to have a bad day. I think there's still a bit of a culture shock here where when Tom Brady threw an interception during training camp, the world stopped. I mean, that happened maybe 2 or 3 times a year. That was a massive moment. Cam's thrown more interceptions. He hasn't been Brady. I'm not breaking news when I say that. That doesn't mean he's been bad. He's been good enough that I'll look around one bad day, just like we looked around one bad day for Mac Jones yesterday. Right. And it was the first padded practice, so maybe there was a little bit more of a microscope on it. But, Mac came back out today and he played well. So I look at yesterday and I say, all right, I need to see him in pads again, but bad days happen. They happen. I think Cam Newton had a bad day today. That's unfortunate. It sucks. You'd like to see him keep stacking the days. You'd like to see him keep playing well, but we'll see kind of how he readjusts tomorrow. We know that the pads being on favor him for a number of reasons, both just his play style. It favors the veteran naturally when there's more contact allowed in the secondary. Right. So tomorrow's set up perfectly to be a bounce back day for him. Again, it's supposed to rain. It's supposed to pour.
Yeah.
So that will be interesting, but I don't know that I look at today and say, Cam threw 2 picks, reset the whole thing. I'm not going that far with it.
Yeah, the first interception was really, really early on in practice. It came against the scout team defense.
I think it was the second throw, wasn't it?
It was the first or second throw of practice, yeah. And I actually got to give credit where credit's due to your guy, Adrian Colbert. I thought he made a pretty good play on the ball.
Made a nice play on that ball, yeah.
Yeah, he undercut it. He kind of baited Cam a little bit into the throw and then accelerated and hit the gas and was able to undercut the Hunter Henry's route and pick off the pass. The second one, I think, is more troublesome, and maybe it was a little bit more of a timing situation than anything, but J.C. Jackson was all over Jacoby Myers. I mean, Jacoby Myers was never open on that route, right? And J.C. Jackson ran the route a lot better than Jacoby Myers did in that particular instance. So on that type of play, that's the type of play. The one to Colbert, those ones happen, right? The DB makes a good break on the ball. Right. The receiver maybe drifted a little bit, and the ball is picked off. But the one later on in practice with Jacoby Myers is the one that Cam needs to get rid of, right? Those types of decisions, throwing it right to J.C. Jackson when J.C. Jackson was clearly in better position to make a play on the ball than Jacoby Myers. Those are the types of plays that can't happen anymore in year two. They happened too often last year. They can't happen this year. So the first one I kind of throw out and say, whatever, good play by the defensive back, tip your cap. The second one is the one that I would sort of harp on as you need to come off this read and make a better decision with the ball.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that the first one, what it looked like to me was, he had Hunter Henry coming across the middle of the field, kind of angled deep, 15 yards. And he was a step ahead of Colbert, a step ahead of Colbert. And I think what Cam was trying to do is put that ball out in front of him and lead him in stride and have him extend his hands to keep the ball away from Colbert and not let Colbert reach in and break it up. And I think what happens is, instead of leading him, ahead and back, he led him ahead, but also in. And Colbert just had a burst. He read it well. He had a burst, and he cut inside with the ball. Henry had to come back towards the quarterback a little bit, and Colbert just had the angle better than Henry did, and he grabbed it in stride. It's an interception we've seen Devin McCourty make. That might be half of his career interceptions.
Right.
So that was an interesting one from Cam, but it was also one where I thought the fact that he had the confidence to make that throw and he recognized that situation. I don't know why he wasn't making that throw last year, but I thought there were times for him to make that throw and he didn't do it. So this is, again, goes back to what I was talking about with, you got to be careful with the numbers. It was a great play by Colbert. Absolutely. But it was almost encouraging to see Cam try to make that throw. He needs to make it right next time. He needs to get that ball more down the field, right, and lead that receiver more. But that, with a guy like Nelson Aguilar specifically, that's a throw that I think has a lot of potential in this offense, and obviously Hunter Henry too. They were throwing it to him. But that's a throw that I think, could be a chunk play designed in this offense. So to see Cam throw that and kind of push that, where he maybe didn't push that throw as much last year, I'll look at that and say, yeah, he threw an interception. That sucks. You don't want to do that. But as we're kind of learning about what this offense is going to look like, all right, that they have that in the toolbox. If they can iron that out and Cam can fix that throw, that becomes interesting.
Yeah, and not to keep harping on this one play, but the other thing I will say,
I'm going to get ripped for complimenting a Cam Newton interception.
We don't have the luxury of watching the practice tape back to examine every single play. So we're making all of these judgment calls on the fly. Usually when a defensive back is able to undercut a receiver's route, there's some receiver error there, right? The receiver didn't come downhill enough on the route and didn't shield the defender enough on the route. Maybe he didn't hold the plane coming across the field and sort of drifted upfield a little bit. There's usually some sort of, unless the ball is just thrown wildly behind the receiver and into the defender, usually there is a little bit of that there too. So I do think that is an important element of this as well. But the main thing, I think the main point that we've tried to make through these first 18 minutes is as much as we come on here and we do a show every single day pretty much after training camp practice, Alex, and the quarterback battle is a roller coaster. And that's what training camp is, right? Training camp is a learning period. It's getting out these kinks. It's making these mistakes now. It's doing all these things. And I think what we are learning every single day and is being reinforced every single day is that this really has not started yet. Right? We're really too early to make all of these grand proclamations of which guy is ahead of which guy and which guy looks better than that guy. And the other thing that Josh McDaniels said after practice that's really important is that they grade, when they go back and grade the practice tape, they grade process, not results, right? They're looking at this was the play call, this was the coverage. Did he make the right read? Did he make the right decision? Did he throw with good mechanics? They're grading process. We don't have the luxury of getting every single play drawn up for us and understanding what each call is. And McDaniels does not give us the play sheet after practice and tell us that this was what each call was and this is what each read was and this is what each progression read was. And we don't get that. So their grading process, not results. I think a lot of the times we have to sort of gravitate more towards results because we don't have the information to grade the process all the time. So we're way too early in all of this. And it really comes down to the fact that we are years away, I think, in football terms, in football time, to actually getting into this being a true decision here, a true battle.
Right. Yeah, like I said, I think the joint practices are going to be a huge part of this. Only one padded practice. We're creatures of habit. We're not creatures of habit. What's the curiosity? I can't think of the word. People want to know. People don't like waiting for information. People don't like waiting for anything, but they really don't like waiting for information. They want to know who it's going to be, so they look at the information they have and they make up their mind. There's a lot more information coming. And you talk about the process again. It goes back to what I said with the interceptions today. I thought one of Mac Jones' interceptions, that I wouldn't be surprised if they go back in the film room and Josh tells him, you did that right. Just, you know, it'll work next time. Don't shy away from what you were doing here. It worked. Same thing with Cam, maybe a little less so, but I think that it wasn't just a bad play. It wasn't just a dumb mistake. There's a learning experience there.
Yep, absolutely. All right, let's talk about N'Keal Harry, because he had 6 catches today in team drills. I think he's looked good, and I tweeted this out earlier. I said, out of the 3 training camps that I've seen from N'Keal Harry as a member of the Patriots since they drafted him in the first round in 2019, this is the best N'Keal Harry that we have gotten at Patriots training camp. Again, 7 practices in, 1 padded practice, all these caveats we can throw out there. But I think the question that we have to ask ourselves is, what does this mean about his future on the team, right? Is this
right?
Are we leaning more towards this being a good thing because it's increasing his trade value and they're going to trade him anyways? Or is he playing his way on the team and as somebody that maybe they won't look to trade because of that?
Yeah, I'll go back to what I said yesterday. I think there's 2 paths, and neither one of them feels super realistic right now. I think he either has to catch that top group of Bourne, Aguilar, and Myers. And by the way, great day today for Kendrick Bourne. Happy birthday to him as well. And then the other option is he's got to kind of pick up some special teams, because he has Christian Wilkerson and Isaiah Zuber right there on top of him, and maybe Trey Nixon as well. So will they keep a 4th receiver who doesn't give them a lot on special teams? Maybe. I had Jeff Howell on my 98.5 The Sports Hub podcast earlier, and we talked about maybe they finagle the numbers a little bit. Maybe they only keep 4 receivers. And that's the thing. And they keep 4 receivers, and N'Keal Harry's the 4th, and those special team spots end up elsewhere, whether it be tight end, running back, somewhere on the defense, whatever it is. So, there's a lot of different ways that can play out, but it just feels like he's between a rock and a hard place right now. And then you throw in whatever the hell that trade request was. We don't even know if that's still a thing, but does that factor in? And N'Keal might be the biggest unknown of anybody at Patriots training camp right now. And it's weird because the better he plays, the more confusing his situation gets.
Oh yeah. My mind is in a complete, puzzle of what is that going to happen here with N'Keal Harry, because he is playing very, very well, especially based off of what we saw in 18 and 19 in training camp. And today, just to name a few plays that happened, he beat Jawan Williams on a dig route, an in-breaker, where he actually, and look, Jawan Williams is not Stephon Gilmore. I get that he has his issues too. We're going to talk about him in a few minutes, but N'Keal Harry actually got open at the top of the route. Right? He ran a route. He made a cut. He created separation at the top of the route, was able to run away from Jawan Williams. And if they were in a live tackling type of situation, I think that was sort of an off to the races potential play there for N'Keal Harry. There was really nobody else in that area and he's a big guy that once he gets downhill and gets moving, I think that would have also been another 10, 15 yards of yak potentially on that throw. That was a true got open in the middle of the field, made something happen. And then later on in practice, he caught the slant, right, from Cam Newton, where he ran on J.C. Jackson. Cam threw the ball off target way too far in front of N'Keal Harry. And N'Keal Harry left his feet laid out and made a diving catch on a slant on a bullet from Cam Newton. So 2 really good catches, 1 catch and run play, 1 kind of showing off that size and that catch radius. And yesterday, in the first day of pads, we saw the catch radius, especially in one-on-ones, where he was going back shoulder, he's going above the rim with Jawan Williams, and showing off the size there as well. So he has a little bit more wiggle, I think. I think he's using his size properly, where he's not just trying to play big all the time. And I think that was something that he talked about in his press conference the other day, is that he got so caught up in being physical and playing big and playing on contested catches and all this stuff that he lost a little bit of his wiggle. And now he got a little bit of that back. So we definitely are seeing a much better N'Keal Harry. And like you said, there's so many roster factors here. How many receivers are they going to keep? Is he going to contribute on special teams at all? There's so many elements of this, but at the end of the day, I can't for the life of me figure out, if you're the Patriots, do you trade this guy now where maybe his stock is rising a little bit because he has had a strong training camp so far and maybe he plays well in the preseason games and that helps his trade value? Or do you look at it and you say, maybe he's figured it out, right? Maybe he's finally put it all together. Right. It still has first round ability. I mean, there's a reason why he was drafted in 32nd overall, and he wasn't going to last very much longer if the Patriots didn't take him at 32. He was going to be a top 50 player in that draft. So has he just figured it out? Is that possible too?
Yeah, well, even if he has, it's weird because, again, you're in 12 personnel a lot. You're really only going to play 2 wide receivers. Even if you think he's figured it all out, are you keeping a 4th wide receiver who's maybe going to play 10, 15% of the snaps all year over keeping, depth on the offensive line, adding another outside cornerback, which I think this team needs, right. Depth at running back. Like if it comes down to, okay, maybe N'Keal Harry's figured it out, but a lot of people like JJ Taylor, and I don't think Taylor's had a great camp, but you look at James White on a 1-year deal, Sony Michel on a 1-year deal, you're going to need you're going to need a running back more than you need a wide receiver a year from now. Just like which way do you want to go with that? So it makes a ton of sense to trade N'Keal Harry, trade request aside. It's weird because normally with bubble guys, they play well, and you're like, all right, well, he was a bubble guy, and he played well, and now he's not a bubble guy. He's on the roster. It's almost like the better N'Keal plays, the more unsure his situation becomes. Because if he didn't play well, all right, they're going to trade him or they're going to cut him. We have the answer. Move on. Because he's playing so well now, there's a chance they keep him, but even before the trade request, like I had him off my initial roster projection. And that was before the trade request.
You don't want to get hoaxed into it, right? You don't want to believe because of training.
Well, not even that.
But that's my problem though, is how much can I believe that what I'm seeing is actually going to translate come, September 9th or 12th or whatever it is, week 1 against Miami? How much can I actually sit here and say that this is actually real, that this is tangible and not just what's happening out at training camp?
Well, and that's fair. And I think, like I said with the quarterbacks, I think the joint practices and the preseason games are going to tell us a lot about that. But even if Harry is the real deal, are you going to keep that guy and use that roster spot on a guy who's making as much as he's making is going to have that usage rate? That doesn't seem like the proper asset management to me.
Yeah.
He'd have to be so good to justify that. And he's been good, but he hasn't been that good yet. And again, these practices are maybe a quarter of the overall grade. You're going to look at the joint practices, the preseason games. Those are going to tell us a lot more.
This is it's a puzzling situation at this point.
You know why? You know why it's so weird? Because, and I've talked about this before in other situations, people like to call Bill Belichick predictable, and they're not entirely wrong. But when you do something for 20 years, as Bill has done it, patterns are going to develop. And it's become in the last 4 or 5 years, it's become possible to read what the Patriots are going to do because you can look at the history and see how they've acted in previous situations. Right. There's no context for this. There's no comparable situation for this. This is a completely new discussion.
Well, because
when it comes to Bill Belichick and roster management,
into their rookie contracts, don't request trades. Right.
Not guys who have played as poorly as Harry.
Right. And the other element of it too, and Belichick spoke about this, I think last week or maybe earlier in the offseason program, was that due to COVID last year, this players going from their first to their second seasons, like N'Keal Harry, they did not have an offseason program. right? They did not have OTAs. They did not have mini camp. They weren't in the building for all those installs and all those kind of teaching periods. So in a lot of ways, last year was kind of like year 1.5 for N'Keal Harry, right? So you kind of expect the year 1 to 2 leap from a lot of players. In year 2, they usually increase their level of production. It's possible for some of the 2019 first round or draft picks just in general that year 2 to 3 might be the real leap, right? If there is going to be a leap. So I think that's an interesting element of it too, but it is weird. It's an interesting situation. I am fascinated to see how they treat him in the preseason. Do they feed him? Do they showcase him? Or do they feel like maybe he's turning a corner and they're going to end up keeping, what do we see out of him in those preseason games is going to be really fascinating. I want to keep it at the wide receivers here just because today was another non-padded day. So a lot of receiver DB sort of battles, right? And back and forth. I wanted to bring up your guy, Gunnar Olszewski, because I think there's a conversation and a question out there right now of, has Gunnar developed as a wide receiver, right? Has he taken the next step as a wide receiver? And I noticed the last couple of practices, and I'm not sure if this has been the case all of training camp, but during wide receiver positional drills, Gunnar's been working with specialists a lot, right? On returns. Today was kickoff returns. Yesterday it was punt returns. So he's not doing wide receiver positional drills. He's not over there with Nelson Aguilar and Kendrick Bourne and N'Keal Harry and Jacoby Myers. He's over on the other field with Matthew Slater and some of the Justin Bethel and the kickers and the punters, or the punter, I should say. So I don't think that they're by any means forcing it with Gunnar as a receiver, right? But then out there at practice today, he did catch the deep ball from Mac Jones. So there are times where I think we do see him flash a little bit as a receiver. He had a nice play earlier in camp where he caught a crossing route over the middle from Cam Newton in the corner of the end zone. And that was a nice kind of route and catch there too. So what have you seen from Gunnar? Do you feel like he has shown you anything to think that he's going to take the next step as a receiver? And ultimately, I don't think it matters to them if he starts to produce as a wide receiver or not. I think they like him so much as a returner that it's not going to matter in terms of roster spots, but it is an interesting conversation.
Yeah, well, I mean, it impacts other roster spots, and it could impact N'Keal Harry, right? If he becomes a legitimate receiver, then you're looking at N'Keal Harry as potentially 5th on the depth chart. So, it does impact. I don't know, he's gotten a little better, and I've talked about this before. Julian Edelman didn't click until his 6th year,
right?
So, but Gunnar's entering his 3rd, so he's got time, and there does seem to be a focus on the return. I have seen him working on kick returns. I think they're more interested in developing him as a kick returner than a wide receiver, which I don't necessarily disagree with that strategy. I think that's the right way to go. I don't think this is the year that, Gunnar breaks out and catches 50 passes. I haven't seen that from him yet. Still a long way to go. Of course, got to throw that on there. But I don't know that. Yeah. Like the catch today was nice. He had a really nice route end of last week, like a wheel route. And he was working with Mac Jones. I think they might've been in 7s, and he timed the break of the wheel perfectly with a pump fake for Mac Jones, and the defender just
it was left him. Yeah.
And it's a nice pump fake for Mac Jones. It's nice all around. So there's been little flashes here and there, and maybe more so than in years past, but I'm not telling anybody to draft Gunnar in fantasy or anything like that. He's not there yet.
And also the other thing is,
I would ever give fantasy football advice.
I also want to quickly say about Gunnar is, throughout his career in the NFL and everything that we've seen from him from preseason games, training camp practices, the little bit that we've seen him in the regular season as a wide receiver, he is not Mr. Shifty Wes Welker, Julian Edelman in the slot, right? Like that's really not his game. The guy that he reminds me of, if I had to draw a comparison, is actually Scotty Miller in Tampa Bay, right? He is a vertical route runner. He is somebody that I think separates a lot more on intermediate and vertical routes. And when I say intermediate, it's like intermediate crossers or dig routes and stuff like that over the middle. And then today, the deep post, you mentioned the wheel, or I think it was sort of like a delayed seam or something like that. And earlier on in training camp, I see him flash, when he flashes, a lot more down the field, right? He's not the jitterbug type of slot receiver that I think a lot of people think he is.
he's more Chris Hogan than he is Julian Edelman.
Yeah. If Patriots fans that have watched Bucks games, if you've watched Scotty Miller a little bit, he's really the type of player that Gunnar reminds me of more than, let's say, an Edelman or an Amendola or a Welker. I just think that they're different players. So I think that that's important to mention. If you've seen any development from Gunnar as a receiver, it's definitely down the field. It's not so much in terms of that little bit, that shiftiness and that short area agility. All right. The other receiver I really wanted to mention today was Trey Nixon, because I don't think that we can look too much into reps against the scout team and stuff like that, but Trey Nixon and Mac Jones have kind of developed a little bit of a chemistry there. When they do go up, the backups kind of go up against the backups or the scout team later on in practice. And Trey Nixon has been working a lot in the slot as an underneath receiver. He came out and we all hyped up his ability to get down the field and be a vertical threat on the outside. Right. So far in practice, they've been running him a ton of option routes on the inside of the formation, running with the twos. And I think that that's really more going to be his game that they project moving forward. And Mac to Trey Nixon in these periods where Mac is working with the second team offense is kind of a thing that's starting to develop.
The other thing it could be is, and they do this from time to time, they know Trey Nixon can be that vertical guy. And so they're just working to round out his game, and they're not going to abandon what he does vertically, but they're just trying to add to it and complement it. And that's encouraging, because that tells you that there's somebody that they have a plan for. When they just throw guys out and have them run generic routes, those are the guys that they're not seriously thinking about. It does look like, and who was I talking about this the other day with Christian Wilkerson? It looks like with Trey Nixon, it looks like they have a plan for him. Now, he's probably a little more raw. He's a guy I think they'd love to stash, and we revisit his status next year.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does look like there's a plan for him, and it does look like they are trying to turn him into more than just a straight line burner. Because when they took him, I think we all thought, all right, well, maybe it turns into Damiere Byrd, and it's good to have a player like that. He's not a number one wide receiver.
Yeah, it's a good comparison. Yeah.
You want just kind of that guy who can fly down the field and keep the defense honest. Here we go, picking on Damiere Byrd again. But I think that's what we all thought when they picked him. And no, it looks like they're going to try to kind of round him out and turn him into a more well-rounded, 3-down wide receiver. And that tells me that they don't plan on just letting this kid go. And we'll see what happens if he makes the roster, if they can get him on the practice squad. I don't think, it's nuts to say he's a Foxborough fluke candidate. So we'll see what happens with him. But it does look like they have a focused plan for him.
He is right now. He's playing the Edelman role with the backups, right? Like, he's the second team Edelman. Right. He's playing inside. He's running. I've wrote down today and throughout the days that he's worked with Mac Jones, 59 option probably a dozen times, right? Where he's just running that little juke series inside, read the zone coverage, sit down, juke out, juke in versus man coverage, little option routes in the inside. And Mac is just really quick to get that ball out, and he just can pick on those underneath linebackers like that with Trey Nixon. And I just didn't know, because he didn't play that role at UCF. Trey Nixon's coaches told me he's a much better route runner than we were able to show off, because we didn't really run that kind of offense, right? We were a vertical offense. We were a get up the field type of offense. So we didn't really get to show how quick he was, but they were all hyping up that he's a really quick receiver that runs good routes. We've definitely seen that, at least against the scout team defense. We'll see. I think in some of these preseason games, Trey Nixon might have a huge game. Right, like
I think he's the guy who's going to pop off.
Yeah, he could have over 100 yards easily in one of these preseason games. So I just wanted to bring him up as well. I also wrote down Adrian Colbert. I mentioned him earlier in the show. Your guy had an interception today. What do you think about it?
Yeah, it was a nice pick. I mean, he hasn't maybe popped as much as I thought he would. He's been the first guy on the field almost every day, so that's interesting. I was looking for him. That kind of play today is what I envisioned him doing. And, complimenting Devin McCourty. They just, in my mind, it was, okay, I'd love to have the Duron Harmon roll back. And can you get another deep safety to pair with McCourty and just give yourself a more reliable 2-high look than just rotating corners back there? But between Miles Bryant. It seems like Miles Bryant's a safety now. I don't think they view him as a corner. He's been working a lot with the
Yeah, he's a nickel safety, right? Because he plays in the slot really behind Jonathan Jones. And yeah.
But he's played deep a couple times too. So I think between Miles Bryant taking on more safety reps, and they're just so deep at box safety and they want to be focused there. I'm starting to kind of rethink that. And the plan I had in mind for Adrian Colbert maybe isn't there. But, good to see him get the interception today. I still think he's a good player. I'd still like to see a way maybe they can stash him. They could get him on the practice squad, and he's maybe a guy, if you get banged up, who would certainly give you, a nice boost down the stretch in the season. But I don't know. I'm going to, the guys I was pumping preseason, I'm going to, start shifting a little more towards Raekwon McMillan. I know he just got hurt, but I'm feeling a little bit better about that one than I was about Colbert. So.
Okay. And also pretty quickly here as well, we mentioned it earlier when we were talking about N'Keal Harry. Jawan Williams is getting picked on by N'Keal Harry in some of the practices. What does his future hold with the Patriots? Because the one thing that I noticed with Jawan Williams, he's got length, and when he's in phase, he's able to use that length to knock away passes pretty easily, but he's just not in phase often enough. And what I mean by in phase is in position, right? He's in position to make a play on the ball. And his hip transitions at the top of the route are just way too delayed and way too slow for NFL receivers. The fact that N'Keal Harry can break away from you on a horizontal cut coming over the middle of the field is probably not great news for you if you're trying to carve out a role as an NFL cornerback in this defense. So, what does the future hold for Jawan Williams? Because right now, I think I wrote it in my notebook. I think he's in the danger zone at this point.
Yeah, and I was trying to defend him before the season, and I it's still true. It's not that he wasn't playing for the last 2 years because he wasn't good. There was just so much depth ahead of him in Gilmore, Jackson, and McCourty, and this, he was just such an unknown because we hadn't seen him. This was his chance to prove why he was a second-round pick and justify that pick and smooth the transition out of that era of those three great corners into whatever the next era is, and he hasn't done it. Like you said, N'Keal Harry is the exact kind of guy he should guard. If you're talking about matchups, around the league, you're not putting him on, or even around the division. He's not a guy who's going to guard Stephon Diggs. He's not a guy who's going to guard
Jalen Waddle.
Yeah, Jalen Waddle would be one. Who did the Jets draft that I'm blanking? Elijah Moore. I always get Elijah and Rondale Moore mixed up. He's not the right. He's going to guard that bigger, bully wide receiver who's maybe not as fast, and he hasn't been able to do that. And if he can't do that, it's tough to figure out exactly what you're going to do with him, what his plan is. And I still am on the roster right now just because as much as he's struggled, he's their third best outside corner.
They kind of need him.
Right. They need him, especially without Stephon Gilmore. But when we get towards the end of camp and we start looking at, okay, what are they going to do externally? Where are they going to go elsewhere to try to bring somebody in? I think corner is the number one spot right now. And I think he's somebody whose job isn't necessarily threatened by anybody on the roster. Like Michael Jackson, he hasn't been great. He had one pass breakup yesterday, but his job is threatened by somebody who's in another camp right now.
At this point, I feel like, honestly, they're better off putting Jalen Mills out there. And you know my opinion on Jalen Mills, right? As an outside corner.
So here's how
I trust Jalen Mills' sort of knowledge of the game more than Jawan Williams, right? He played more snaps. He's got a better feel for the game, instincts, those types of things.
Here's how I feel about Jalen Mills outside of that. I think you paid him all that money to be a wild card. You paid him all that money to do all these different things on defense. And I'd like to see him doing that. Like, you want him to practice what he's going to play. If you have to have him at outside corner, even if that's not the long-term plan, but you just need the body, well, then he's not getting reps at what he's going to do in the regular season. And that ultimately hurts the team. So somebody's got to step up there in some way, because this is probably the biggest question mark on the team right now. I know people are going to talk about the quarterback position, and there is a answer there. Whether it's Cam Newton or Mac Jones, we know that the answer is in the building. I don't know that the answer is in the building at outside corner. And that is a little scary, because we've seen what this team looks like they've won without dominant linebackers. They've won without dominant players at different positions. Their darkest period under Bill Belichick was when they didn't have a dominant corner, the Earthwind Moreland, Hank Poteet era. Right.
The 2020
their longest stretch, that AFC championship, and Belichick got fed up and he went out and got to leave, and that wasn't good enough, and he got Revis. So they still have JC Jackson. It's not totally burnt, and Gilmore might come back, but there's a massive drop off after that right now.
Right. All right. So really quickly, shout out to our fans in Germany. They've been in the
I
chat
feel bad.
We've
been getting asked about the fullback so much.
They've been in the chat the last couple of days asking about Jakob Johnson. Jakob Johnson is a full padded practice player, right? So 6 out of 7 of these practices, we have not really seen much Jakob Johnson because they're not running the ball with the fullback all that often. So yesterday, though, Jakob Johnson coming through the hole on Dante Hightower, back on backer, that was a really nice lead block, right? And you see the lead block ability. Tomorrow, it's going to pour. It's going to rain. There's going to be a lot of run game stuff. So we will definitely see more of Jakob Johnson. But Jakob Johnson on the first day of pads did his job. Right. He led the way for the backs when he was out there and he did his job. We'll definitely have to see how much they're going to use him and how much 12 personnel they're going to be in and all that kind of stuff. But come back tomorrow because I think they're going to run the ball like crazy in practice tomorrow. Yeah. So come back tomorrow and we'll talk more Jakob Johnson and fullbacks and run game and stuff like that. Once again, tomorrow on Thursday, the Patriots will be back in pads. It's going to pour. So it's going to be a fun practice for Bill Belichick, I'm sure, to see kind of study the mental toughness of his team already in the early going to see how they handle the conditions. So we'll be back on the podcast tomorrow night following day 8 and padded practice number 2 for the Patriots, breaking all of that down. Should be a higher intensity and a longer practice than what we saw out there today. So we'll see you guys tomorrow night for day 2 of pads, day 8 of training camp. Thanks so much for watching. For Alex Barth and Evan Lazar, see you tomorrow, guys. And gals, if you're out there.